The car didn't move. It sat in the parking lot of Greater New Zion Baptist Church for nearly 4 minutes. Engine off, windows up, Newark, New Jersey baking under a May sun that had no business being this heavy at 9 in the morning. Inside, Whitney Houston stared at the entrance doors. She had sung for presidents. She had sold out arenas across 3 continents. But right now, those double wooden doors felt more terrifying than any stage she had ever walked onto. Because behind those doors wasn't an audience, it was her community. And her community had made it very clear, 2 years ago, that they were done with her. March 1989, the Soul Train Music Awards. Whitney stood backstage, waiting to accept her award. The applause was polite, not the kind that fills your chest. Then came the boos, not loud, not overwhelming, but unmistakable. A few voices in that audience decided to say what many in the Black community had been saying privately for years, that Whitney had crossed over too far, that she belonged to radio stations and boardrooms now, not to church pews. Someone even shouted it. Whitney! That word cut deeper than any critic ever had, because it wasn't coming from a stranger. She smiled through it. She accepted the award. She said thank you with perfect composure. But backstage, alone, she let herself feel it, and she never quite stopped feeling it. If you've ever felt judged by the very people who raised you, stay with us. Because what happened inside that Newark church on a Sunday morning in May 1991 is a story nobody ever heard. Subscribe if you're just finding this channel. The phone call from Reverend Thomas Caldwell came on a Tuesday morning in early April. Caldwell had known Cissy Houston for over 30 years. He had watched little Whitney grow up singing in this exact church. Whitney, his voice was warm but direct. Come sing with us. She laughed. Not because it was funny, because she didn't know what else to do. Reverend Caldwell, you know what happened at Soul Train. I do. Your congregation was probably cheering. A pause. Some of them were, he said. She respected him for that. No sugarcoating. Then why are you inviting me? Because I remember who taught you to sing. She knew what he meant. Not a vocal coach. Not a record executive. Not Clive Davis. The church. They're not ready for me, she said quietly. Maybe not, Caldwell replied, but you might be ready for them. She stayed up until 2 in the morning, thinking about those words. 2 weeks of doubt followed. She called her mother. Cissy Houston always picked up on the first ring. Mama, they're going to tear me apart in there. Let them try. That's not helpful. Whitney Elizabeth. Her mother's voice shifted into something firm and unshakable. You didn't learn to sing in a recording studio. You learned in a pew. With me, don't you forget that. She didn't forget it, but the fear wasn't about her voice. The fear was about what people might discover if she walked into that church and stripped everything away. The albums, the awards, the image Clive Davis had spent years carefully building. What if there was nothing left underneath? The night before the service, she sat alone in her hotel room and played a cassette. A 12-year-old girl singing in a church in Newark. It was her. She listened without moving. By the end, she was crying, not from sadness, from recognition, because she could hear something in that girl's voice she hadn't heard in herself in a very long time. Something unafraid. She called Caldwell at 11 o'clock that night. I'll be there, she said. I know, he said. He didn't sound surprised at all. What song, she asked. You already know. She did. Now, sitting in the parking lot with the engine off, she pressed her palms flat against her thighs. She was wearing a simple navy dress. No glamour, no statement jewelry. The kind of things she might have worn to church at 17 before anyone outside of New Jersey knew her name. She opened her purse and took out a folded piece of paper, her mother's handwriting. Cissy had slipped it into her bag the night before without saying a word. It read, "The voice God gave you was never meant for stadiums alone. Go home, baby." Whitney read it twice. Then she got out of the car. The sanctuary of Greater New Zion was full. Not the quiet, reverent full of a normal Sunday morning, the charged full of people who had heard something unexpected was happening. Whitney felt their eyes the moment she walked through the doors. Some people smiled. Real smiles. Others didn't. An older deacon near the aisle watched her with an expression that said everything. You left, You got famous. You came back. We'll see. Whitney kept walking. She sat in the front row next to Reverend Caldwell. Her hands were folded in her lap. She could feel her pulse all the way in her fingertips. The service began. The choir sang first. Powerful, unpolished, completely alive. Whitney closed her eyes and just listened. This was what gospel felt like when nobody was watching the clock. This was the real thing. She felt something loosen in her chest. Then Reverend Marcus Hill approached the pulpit. "We have a guest with us today," he said. The room shifted. "Some of you know her from the radio. Some of you know her from that Soul Train Awards night." A long silence. "But I'm going to ask you to set all of that aside. Because today she's not here as a star. She's here as a daughter of this church." He stepped back, and Whitney stood up. The walk from the front pew to the pulpit microphone was maybe 15 feet. It felt like 15 miles. She gripped the wooden edge of the pulpit when she reached it, just for a second, just to steady herself. She looked out at 400 people, some curious, some skeptical, some openly resistant. "Good morning." Her voice came out smaller than she expected. A few people responded, not all of them. "I know some of you aren't sure why I'm here." She glanced down. "Honestly, I've been asking myself the same thing for 2 weeks." A small laugh moved through the room. "I grew up in this community. Some of you knew me before I knew myself." A pause. "And I know some of you feel like I walked away from where I came from." The room went very quiet. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you I didn't change. Because I did." Her voice stayed even. "What I've been trying to figure out is whether I changed in ways that actually matter." Nobody moved. "I came here today to sing one song, not to prove anything, but because I need to remember something I think I've been forgetting." She closed her eyes. No piano, no band, nothing. Just her voice and 400 people holding their breath. "Why should I feel discouraged?" The first note came out bare, vulnerable, stripped of every production decision, every layer of studio polish that had defined her career for years. Just the note, just her. "Why should the shadows come?" Something moved through the sanctuary, invisible but completely real, the way air pressure changes right before a storm. "Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home?" Her voice cracked on home. She didn't correct it. She didn't push past it or cover it with power. She let it crack. She let it sit there in the air for everyone to hear. And that was the moment. Not the high notes that came after, not the choir joining her without instruction, not the first woman near the back who started to weep. The moment was the crack, the small, honest imperfection that proved she was a human being standing in a church, not a performer delivering a set piece. The crack said, "I am not here to impress you. I am standing in front of you with nothing to hide behind." 400 people felt the difference between that and everything else they had ever seen her do. By the second verse, the choir was with her. Not because anyone signaled them. They simply rose and joined her the way people do when something true is happening. By the final chorus, the entire congregation was standing. Not applauding, not cheering, just standing, present, together. When the last note faded, the room held its silence. Then Reverend Hill said quietly, "Thank you, Lord," and the church broke open. Afterward, people came to her. A woman around 60 grabbed both of Whitney's hands. "I was one of the ones who talked," she said. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. "I was wrong." A teenage girl said she had been thinking about quitting the choir. "I don't think I will now," she said, and walked away before Whitney could respond. The old deacon who had watched her walk in with skeptical eyes stood in front of her for a full minute without speaking. Then he nodded once. That was enough. But the conversation that stayed with her longest happened near the end of the afternoon, when the sanctuary had mostly emptied and the light through the stained glass had turned golden and long. An elderly woman named Sister Dorothy Mae Collins made her way slowly down the center aisle. Somewhere in her mid-80s, small and precise in a white hat and gloves, the kind of woman who had been a fixture here since before Cissy Houston was a young girl in the choir. She sat down beside Whitney without asking permission. Neither of them spoke for a moment, Then Sister Dorothy May reached into her cloth bag and pulled out a small music notebook. Cover water-stained, pages swollen from decades of use. She placed it in Whitney's hands. "This belonged to your mother," she said simply. Whitney stared at it. "Cissy gave it to me for safekeeping 30 years ago. Said she wanted someone to have it who understood what it was." The old woman folded her hands in her lap. "I think she always knew it would find its way back to you." Whitney opened the first page. Her mother's handwriting, chord notations, lyrics, margin notes in pencil, faded but readable. Songs Whitney had heard Cissy sing at home her whole life, but never heard performed anywhere else. A whole private world that existed before the record deals and the magazine covers. She sang because she had to, Sister Dorothy May said. Not because the world was asking her to, because the music was already inside her and it needed somewhere to go. She looked at Whitney with steady, clear eyes. "That's what I heard from you today." Whitney still couldn't find words. "The version of you on the radio," Sister Dorothy May continued, her voice gentle but without softness. "That's a person. But the person I heard this morning, that's a soul." She patted Whitney's hand once. "Don't lose her again." She stood up slowly and walked toward the exit, and Whitney sat alone in the emptying sanctuary, holding her mother's notebook for a long time after everyone else had gone. She never talked about that Sunday publicly, not in interviews, not in documentaries, not from any stage. But people who knew her well said something shifted after Newark, something quieter, more settled, like she had found the ground under her feet again after years of walking on surfaces that never quite held. She kept the notebook. It traveled with her through everything that followed, through the bodyguard and the years of sold-out tours, and the hard years and the harder years after those. When things got heavy, she would open it and read her mother's handwriting in the margins. And remember a Sunday morning in May when she walked into a church that wasn't sure it wanted her, sang a song she had known since she was 8 years old, let her voice crack in front of 400 people, and found her way back to something she thought she had lost. Perfection was what the industry had always asked of her. But that morning in Newark, she offered something rarer, the truth. And the truth, as it turned out, was more than enough. Have you ever walked into a room that didn't think you belonged there, only to realize it was exactly where you needed to be? Tell us your story in the comments below.